Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Audiorama. Thanks for being here with us. I'm Fabio De Luca. We are officially starting. It's time to introduce the first person in this Audiorama project, a guy with a very strange surname, and that guy is Dorian Linsky. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to introduce and be talking to you for the next hour the musician, filmmaker, performance artist across many media, Laurie Anderson.
Hello, how are you?
So I think I've noticed that, as you could tell from my introduction, you know, it's sort of can be hard to introduce somebody that does so many things without worrying that you're leaving something out. And feeling that sort of multimedia artist is a bit of a cop-out phrase for all of these sort of different things. But is there, because you sort of seem to move so naturally between all these forms, and music was how I would have first encountered you, and I think like a lot of people, but it's not sort of, I'm not sure whether you have any kind of ranking, or whether they're all kind of, to you, you know, art forms that are just different angles on achieving what you want to achieve.
When I'm making a painting, it feels so much like music, you know. And I like to make very big paintings. They're very bad paintings, but they're very big. So anyway, playing the violin is this gesture, and that's my main instrument. And so playing like this, and then painting like this. So it's really the same gesture, plus it's all the same questions that I ask about the work. Is it wild enough? Is it beautiful enough? Is it unbalanced enough? Is it it doesn't seem to be so different to me. The same with film. I would have the same in a way as a live concert or as improv. And so, but I have to say, multimedia. Whenever young artists ask me about, you know, why are you doing so many things, I just say, multimedia is a good thing to call yourself. It's totally meaningless. Everybody's multimedia. It's saying nothing, and I don't think it's like a wonderful thing to do so many different kinds of things. It's just how I myself happen to work, and anyway. So it's not something that I necessarily recommend to people unless they enjoy working on lots of different forms. So that's it.
But suppose there's a difference between what feels very natural in the sort of flow between these art forms when you're working on your own, and then the different worlds in which you operate. And presumably there's different sort of, I don't know, you know, codes of conduct and assumptions and rituals within these sort of worlds. And you've had with the music, you know, on your first album, you had this sort of strange pop moment with Oh Superman. And so there, you know, that you touched on that bit, and then other times you're talking at, you know, and you're in galleries or you're talking in conferences.
Yeah.
And do you have to learn the sort of rituals of each of these sort of worlds? Is that where the complications come in?
Well, there's two parts to that question. One is, do you use the strategies from one type of work and put it into another? And how does the context influence what you're making? So in the first, for example, in a record, you can make 12 songs and they don't have to really have anything to do with each other. They can be 12 separate, beautiful worlds. Just 12 jewels on a necklace. They don't have to push. No, I just made a film, and I realized there can't just be a collection of stories or a collection of something. You have to have, it has to be going somewhere. It needs an engine. And this engine is something that I think about it a lot. So if you put a narrative engine in music, sometimes it's like pointless, or it sounds very, very artificial. But if you don't have a narrative engine in a film, it seems just like, oh, here's a bunch of nice songs or stories. Where are you going? What do you want? So I saw that was the first situation I saw that in. Is I made a kind of misguided opera project. Rita knows about this, an opera based on Moby Dick. Now, if you have a plan to make an opera based on your favorite book, don't do it. Because, you know, if you fall in love with something and you want to just make it like it is, and you have to be a little bit rough with something when you're making it, and you have to have the courage to change it and wrench it around and push it, and I didn't have that courage, and I thought, you know, I just thought Moby Dick sounds like music to me. It's a book that sounds like, wow, it needs some, and so. But really, I mean, I lived in the same neighborhood as Melville in New York, and I thought, he's going to come and find me and kill me. My book does not need to be a multimedia opera. Thank you very much. It's a perfectly beautiful novel. But I found out a lot of things when I was working on this opera. I did a lot of research on how it was made. How is this work of art made? Where is it? How's it going? So one of the things I found was, in the first draft of this book, of Moby Dick, there was no Captain Ahab, no captain. And I really love to imagine going to this meeting of Melville with his editor, and the editor goes, you know, Herman's like, the book is good. It's really good. It's like, a lot of interesting, you know, details on ropes and, you know, different kinds of sea life and, you know, sails. But, you know, I mean, basically this book is guys go fishing. You know, where's it going? What do you want in here? So he said, I think you need a crazy captain, something to, you know, like just pick somebody. So he picked Captain Ahab. Now, if you notice, if you're reading the book, and you might have read it, or you might have read it a long time ago or whatever, or you might not have read it, when you read it, you'll notice that there is no Captain Ahab for the first third of the book. Why? Because he wasn't written yet. He wasn't invented. So a third of the way through the book, he comes stalking out of the hold. He has a British accent. We don't know why. It's very stagey. It's very, very theatrical. It's almost like he comes up onto a stage and he goes, "Avast!" And he has this big problem, you know, with a whale, and he's obsessed. And so this fear drives it. This rage drives it. He's an American Lear. There he is. You know, so that is the engine. So when I'm working on something that needs an engine, I have to remember to get one. So I have to find a way to make a number of questions in that work that pull you through it, that make you want to go through it. And it's a very different experience from listening to music, where you listen to this one, that's cool, you listen to that one, but they don't really have to have that thing that's pulling you. So so I try to make sure that I'm not using the wrong strategy. So if you use that strategy in music, it can sound ridiculous. It can sound so forced, and like you're making a concept album, and you kind of go, lighten up. This isn't, you know, music doesn't have to do this. Music can take you to another place like that. It doesn't have to have those safety ropes. It can transport you immediately. So you have, when you're making all these different kinds of landscapes or places or things, you have to figure out how they relate to each other. Now, the second part of your question about context, you know, when you put something from one world into another world, those worlds are so different. And I wish they weren't, and I hope we get to talk about that today, because a lot of the so-called worlds in New York, and we love to call them worlds because we're snobs, you know, the art world, the fashion world, the music world, the literary world, and they're all quite really isolated from each other, and very provincial, really, you know, because I just have a hope sometime that these worlds will have a little bit more to do with each other. You know, and yesterday we were talking about that a little bit, because I was saying that even worlds like the worlds of music and medicine, for example, when a couple of years ago we were talking about Brian Eno earlier, and he had one of his really beautiful quiet rooms going in Brighton as a sound installation, and there was a surgeon who came to the sound installation. He said, "I wish this could be in hospitals, because you need to get away from the and you don't necessarily want to go into the religious room to pray to whatever. And so, what about a place that has music and a specific kind? So 2 weeks later, Brian Eno's sound installation was in the hospital in Brighton. Now, in the United States, our walls between hospitals and music venues are very thick. You can't call up a hospital and do that. But then I did an experiment. I spent a lot of time in Cleveland at a place called the Cleveland Clinic, and they have a couple of years ago, and they have a beautiful music collection and art collection. It's one of the only places in the United States. And I said, what about a Brian Eno installation here? And they went over to hear it, and they installed it in their hospital. So I realized, wow, if the walls are there, but if you push against them, you can maybe try. So that's another thing I'd like to talk about today is how these different worlds that, it's easy to get very involved in your own world. And when you're doing things in the so-called art world, I think a lot of artists are really feel so claustrophobic because of the art police. And the art police come and they say, you're a musician, you shouldn't be making, essays, or you're a filmmaker, why are you making music? So we're in a world where those boundaries are much more fluid, and you can do stuff like that. So,
because you've been doing different kinds of things since the 60s, and I always imagine, I suppose, the 70s New York, those walls were kind of less divisive, that sort of artists and musicians and sort of were mingling. I mean, were you, did you have to sort of empower yourself to do all of these different things, or was there a kind of culture where that it was just acceptable? Because I'm thinking of various figures where they were collaborating or they were crossing over, and it seemed like, did you have sort of a crew? Did you have sort of kindred spirits where you felt like, oh, okay, we can do this? Or did it feel like you just had to do your own, you were on your own path?
It was kind of a combination. I think at that point in the 70s in New York, the most important thing to remember is no money was involved. Money was not involved. None of the people that I worked with, sculptors, painters, musicians, had any idea that they would ever make one dime doing this. That thought was not on our minds. The world is completely different. Now, sometimes if a young artist tells their parents, I'm going to be an artist, they go, great, it's like a multimedia empire you're going to create. Open the London office soon, it's no longer, this like kind of thing that only deadbeats would do. So, but in the 70s, we were very ambitious as well, and we were going to change the way music sounded, and we were going to change the way media was working. And because there weren't so many outlets in the United States for that, we followed in the footsteps of our jazz forebears, so we became expats. And so I worked mostly in Germany at that point, because I would come to Germany in a town, and they would say, would you like to work with the symphony? Or would you like to meet the mayor and talk about a media project? I was like, that would never happen in New York, never. And that was before a number of organizations happened. So we had to do this on our own. So one of the things I did was I started out really as a sculptor and then and a filmmaker. So I would do things that would be sort of three-dimensional films. So there'd be a film in the background, and that would do music or stories or something. And we would do these. I would do these in film festivals in New York. And by film festival, I mean 6 people in a loft looking at the films. And so I thought, what could I do if I wanted to have a bigger screen, or if I wanted to have someone other than my friends and family see the same thing every week? So I put all of my, I wrote about 500 letters to European art centers. I didn't bother with North America. And I said, I'm planning a fall tour of my new show, and would you like to be part of it? Now, I had no fall tour, I had no spring tour, I had no tour. I didn't know how to tour. I was just making it up. So I got 2 responses of those 500 letters, and I went on my tour. And I packed up some Pelican cases with film and slides and electronics and music and my violin, and I went and I did these multimedia shows. So that's how I got my start, and I realized, and also when young artists ask me about how to start, I always say, do not wait for someone to ask you what you want to do. No one will ever ask you that. No one will ever offer the thing you really want to do. Don't wait around for that. Make it up, and then just do it. So I think a number of people did that at that point, and we gradually, for economic reasons and for real estate reasons, we moved out of New York gradually, because artist communities, as we know, are a question of real estate, number one. Where can artists get cheap enough housing to live and make a community? So at that point, we saw each other every day. And I'm talking about a group that included Gordon Matta Clark, Phil Glass, Trisha Brown, a number of jazz musicians, and very eclectic. And we were all interested and ambitious in terms of making new things. So at one point, I remember there was one fall, everyone was working on operas. So no matter what you were doing, even a dancer or whatever, you'd be walking down the street. How's your opera? Mine's fine. It was just a fad. I don't know what happened to all those operas, but it was. The point I'm trying to make is it was a coherent, ambitious community that could work in a physical place, and it had a lot of relationship to each other. So we were able to create a style, even though it was very ragged and it had many edges. And it had nothing to do with money. So that was, now eventually the jobs that you do with a pickup truck dry up, and so you move on. So that scene was a fragile one, like all scenes, like all of the scenes that you think, oh, this is the one. A few years later, it's gone. So I'm a little bit nostalgic about it because people helped each other. At that point, we genuinely helped each other do their work. And this was really an amazing thing to have that kind of generosity, because the world is so competitive now and so much about branding and so territorial and so much about this is me and I'm going to frame myself like this and sell myself like that. And so it obviously comes from our corporate world that we need to stamp out our little territory and make it coherent and make it a short message for other people to get. So, and that's also a really interesting kind of phenomenon that I hope we can talk about. I'd love to hear your ideas on how that's working, and is there room to change that or enhance that branding situation, which we're all in together.
And you said back then that you had to, you had to go to Germany to find these opportunities, and now you've done work in so many different places and had offers of, sort of artists in residence and come here and come there. Is it sort of the nature of what you do that it has to be international, that you couldn't just do everything if you stayed in New York, or are you looking for a new place, almost a sort of new location to unlock, new ideas?
I guess I'm looking to my heart for that. I'm not really looking for a place. All the work that I do comes from trying to be free, and so that when I'm in hyperdrive as an artist, I can get all excited about doing this and that all over the world, and I do love. I'm a geek. I love working with big systems, so I get drawn into that a little bit, and that means that you do need partners. So in the last couple of years, I've had a lot of partners. I did a film with Arte TV, a French-German channel, And my partners in a work called Habeas Corpus were in a legal team in London. And so I often look outward to find partners, but it's not to you know, I don't think that you need a big system to make great work. I think you need a dangerous heart, you know, to do that.
And I mean, the way that you make music, there's kind of very distinctive use of various sort of technologies and electronic devices. And I wonder, which sort of device, which piece of musical equipment do you think changed the way that, you know, opened up the most possibilities for you, changed the way that you could work? Because I find most people have this sort of thing that they acquired that suddenly enabled them to go in a different direction.
Okay, so I was mentioning, somebody asked me that yesterday, and I just remembered something, so I'm going to tell you what it was. It was I always wanted to sing like a violin, so I got a little pillow speaker. No, this is just a little pillow speaker that you record something on, and you put it in your pillow, and you sleep on it. You can do, you know, you can learn German in your sleep. I woke up feeling just paranoid. You know, I didn't learn anything really. But I'm a very oral person, so I like putting things in my mouth. So I thought, how about if I record some violin on this speaker, put it in my mouth, and I can modulate the phrases and change a little bit the pitch and a little bit the spatial aspect of the music. And so put it in my mouth and just, you know, it's a kind of human theorem. And it was very satisfying, you know. And as a violinist, I find it when, you know, people like saxophone players put their instruments in their mouths, it's kind of like disgusting, let's face it, you know. You should keep your instrument out of your mouth. Just a personal opinion. So this little instrument was from the past, and I had used it a few times in concerts, and it's just a way to integrate singing technology, the violin, you know, in a very humble way. Okay, so then I was given a tech prize, and they said, we want you to give a little speech. So I thought, I'll just, instead of talking, I'll just do this little singing thing. And so I got, it was down in Florida. I was a practice speaker from the past, and I had upgraded it. You know, I used chips instead of cassettes, and it was you know, very compact and very nice, but it was still the same little pillow speaker. So I put this pillow speaker in my mouth, and because I think the mixture of the moisture of the mouth and the glue in the speaker and the fluids glued the speaker to the roof of my mouth. And I thought, the roof of my mouth is melting. It's going. So I'm in Florida. I don't know what to do. I just have this thing glued in my mouth and a cable coming out like that. And I went to a drugstore, and I was like, no, the person in this drugstore had probably seen worse things coming into the drugstore that had gotten stuck, you know. And they were like, okay, so they swabbed it out, and so that's probably the thing that changed my mind the most about pieces of technology, and just probably better not to do that and did. But I love cheap little things. I love fixing things. When I started out, I still have a studio on Canal Street in New York, and that's the electronic street. So I loved playing around with technology and music. So I would just do things like, you know, mostly because things were broken, and I would have a Linn drum machine, this little tiny, really terrible sounding drum machine, and I had one, and it was broken, and so I took it apart to fix it. And inside, the little sensors are on really, really long cables. They don't need to be on cables that are more than this long, but they were on cables that were a couple meters long. So why are they on this? So they still worked like. So I sewed them into a suit, and which became this kind of drum suit, so that you sew the bass drum over your heart, boom, 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 you know, and the snares, the knee, and the. symbols are the hands, and so you can become a kind of human dome, this kit. Basically, it's trying to fix things that is inspiring to me in terms of technology.
And I mean, I suppose a lot of people would sort of know from your music the use of sort of different voice filters, and sort of most famously, the voice of authority being this quite well-known one. And is there something very liberating about if you're trying to sort of get out of yourself, almost get distance from yourself, just being able to change the voice like that? And does that make it easier to be almost a different sort of character?
Well, I mean, I think we already have 10 voices already, and it is liberating to use your very intimate voice that you just talk to your best friend. Just talk to them like that and start talking that way to a group of people, So you already have those. They're available anytime you want to use them. But we get into the cliche of, well, I'm using my interview voice right now. So, but even though electronics can make that much more extreme, so you find that if you have a voice that's like that, I can't really do it, nothing without electronics, that you have very different things to say. You get into a trap of your own personality, and even when you try to push out a little bit, you notice like sometimes your friends go, "You're not being yourself. That's not like you." And you go, "Really?" Well, sometimes of course we're born with a lot of things that our parents gave us, so we have certain qualities, but a lot of it we invent. And so in a situation like that, of a frustrating situation where you want to express something, but that's not part of your personality, I see that as a kind of design problem. So that when you designed, so for example, let's say something happens and you just want to scream bloody murder, you just want to scream. But you say, I'm really not the kind of person who screams. And that's okay, but if you still want to scream, then it's a problem. So, and I see it as a design problem, that you can go back in and tinker with the design that you've made, with the restrictions that you've already made on your personality, and redesign that, and become a person who can scream if you want to scream. You don't have to be a screamer, but you don't have to suddenly say, I wouldn't do that because that's not me. What's you? What's you? It's a formulation that you made, and it's something that other people want you to stay within those boundaries, because then they won't recognize you. And so, but if you really want to get out, which is a big ambition of my own, to get out of this thing that I've drawn, then I electronics and vocal things help you kind of do that, and realize that you have a lot of other things to say that you would say if you didn't have to stay within the boundaries of your prescribed style that you're promoting yourself and trying to. And it's also it's exhausting to be a consistent person. Why do you have to do that? Who told you have to do that?
And do you think that an artist has to sort of be wary of letting the technology lead them? Because I can think of certain kinds of music using very easily available software now, where it seems almost like, even though you can actually do with GarageBand, there's no end to what you can do, but it feels like if you're not careful, you can run on train tracks, and to end up producing things that just sound like other things that people are doing with that software. And the way that you seem to use, they said, like using kind of cheap things, playing with them, putting them in different contexts, is that something you have to sort of make sure that it's you using this tech and not that using, that sort of using you or shaping you?
I don't have a problem with technology using me, or being on a runaway train of technology. I love it. I mean, if I'm playing with something, I'm in. I don't have to like stamp it with my own, name, or care that other people are on that train. It can be really great that you are. And if you think that, also that, I wonder if anyone else is doing this, that's over. It's over for you then, you know, because the joy of going there is gone, because you're like looking around at other people, you know. It's not your problem right then. Your problem is to make music and have the great joy of going there and using the toys to the maximum and breaking them or making do whatever, or just using them as they are. You know, it's not a. But of course, our world is seen as a race, and so it makes it a lot less fun for people. So I think that the pressure to invent things and to be cutting edge is for some people a kind of a torture because it's very hard to do that and make music. You know, I think you can probably do one or the other, but things happen as you if you put yourself into it. It will be something that other people would most likely enjoy as well, I think. I mean, I've always trusted that more than anything, that I'm average enough person to think if I think that's funny, probably other people would think it's funny. Now, some things only I think are funny. I've noticed that. And sometimes I'm trying to tell someone something like, that's not funny. No, it is funny. I'll see what's funny about it. So, you know, we're alone in a lot of our endeavors, but I would say just pursue them in a wholehearted way and see what happens. You know.
I was reading that at one point in your life you spent some time on an Amish farm as like a sort of. Were you trying to do a sort of tech purge so that you were going in completely the opposite direction? And how was that, sort of just rejecting all of that?
Yeah, that was from an experiment that I called Happiness, and I did a lot of things in that situation, and I put myself in situations where I didn't really know what to do. Because, you know, I'm an artist, I have a style, I do my style. People go, that's your style, and they kind of go, oh, you're not doing your style, whatever. You get style trapped. So I thought, what can I do if to get out? So I put myself in these situations I went to where I didn't know what to do, say, or how to act. So I worked at McDonald's for a while as a breakfast person. And I went on a number of trips. One was to this Amish farm. So this was a place that uses, because I was doing technology 24 hours a day. And so I thought, I got to get away from this. I'm going to go to this place that has zero technology. This trip did not go well. This was this was a place where, they didn't use any technology. But so we're there, and it came at a time when they just used wheels and wind. You know, basically they stopped in the 17th century, stopped the clock. That's it. Boom. We go no further. And so they were farmers, and so I would work with them once in a while. But the times I was there, the few weeks I was there, it rained every single day. So we sat in the kitchen waiting for the rain to stop so we could go out and do a little weeding, come back, and just the rain's drumming down. Now, there's no technology, there's no phone, there's a couple of books, but even books were a little too techno for them because it was that page turning and the printing and all of that. So they kept it down. So we were just sitting at the table and staring at each other. The rain is drumming down day after day. Now, one of the things about this was there was a huge amount of resentment in this kitchen because, the hours would go by in this, and the woman would suddenly, out of the blue, say to her husband, David, you know I told you never to talk to me like that. And he had not said anything for hours. So I was looking over, he was like, now, it would be another 20 minutes before he would go, some equally bitter comeback, no, I don't, So I have seen rage in many forms, but never like this slow form of absolute anger and rage. And I thought, I get me back to New York where people can scream at each other if they're angry. You know, it was this kind of, so I had expected somehow to have, you know, people away from technology are going to be free and they're going to be outside and they're going to be, but no, it was just this, thing that wouldn't stop. You know, it wouldn't stop. It was just stagnated, and anyway, there was lots of other parts to that story, but we should go on. It's actually too sad to think about it.
Oh no. How do you choose to? How do you choose to listen to music generally? What's your sort of, you know, device of choice? Or I mean, is it a streaming thing? Is it a downloads thing? Is it vinyl? Is it reel-to-reel cassettes? I don't know. What's your sort of?
Yeah, it's all of those things. It depends on what kind of. Mostly, I'm a serial listener. So if I am working on a project with someone, I will listen to that person's work hundreds of times. You know, just on repeat, no matter whatever system I'm listening to. I love walking around and doing a lot of things while I'm listening to music as well. So I'm doing Blu-ray headphones, and it's like I'd like to move around. I like to listen in a lot of different kinds of systems. So there's and I love live. I love live music. So doing some installations with sound, with extremely loud sound. And recently we've been doing some installation of my husband Lou Reed's guitars, and he did some guitar feedback pieces that were so intense and physical and sensational. And so we've made a couple of installations with his guitar tech. And these are open tunings that really interesting tunings that create just amazing harmonics. And it's very, very complex, very extremely loud sound. So recently we installed this in a very large place in New York City in the Park Avenue Armory, and really cranked it up. There are a number of systems that I really love listening to. I mixed my film Heart of a Dog, of course, on 5.1, but then I went to a film festival in Toronto and they had Atmos set up, and I was like, I could not believe this system. It was shelves of sound that I've always been phenomenally frustrated with stereo. You know, it doesn't represent the ocean of sound we live in any way, you know, and neither does Atmos either, but, you know, it suddenly filled in all of these spaces that I hadn't realized I had been neglecting, you know. So, and I remember, for example, and that's a tricky thing because of the first time I went to, there's a place in New Jersey called Bell Labs, and they are the kind of audio extreme experimenters with audio, and so they asked a number of musicians, or like 4 musicians in the mid-90s, to come and listen to their compression. And they were compressing music because they want to, you know, send it faster. So they were playing the compressed versus the uncompressed for us. And, you know, these are audio technicians, and you think that their ears would just be like amazing. But they were saying, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of this version? I said, you think that sounds like the record? There's 17 parts missing. You know, for example, you know, I'd put the guitars at 11 and 1, and, you know, they were just, and then other things out at 3 and 9, and they were erased because they were panned out. And so they had been swept to noon and nulled. So they weren't there. And I said, what happened to the guitars? Oh, well, we're not really doing that much panning. And so the kind of losses that you experience in compression was just, we were speechless. It was like, who are you people? What do you think you're, this is like, you know, it's also I went to Lincoln Center because I've been looking for ways to do archiving of giant giant archives of music. So I went to Lincoln Center. I heard some things from their archive. And it was a piece that I know well, and it had been transferred backwards and at the wrong speed. And I said, you people are not archiving. This is destruction of music. You think you're doing this person a favor? And then they destroyed the originals because it had been archived. It was horrible. So archiving music is a big thing now that I think as many people's libraries are huge numbers of media, different kinds of forms of DA88s and, like F1s, just crazy formats. And they all need to be digitized now. Or not all of them, because how obsessive do you want to be? But a lot of the major studios in New York now are only doing archives. Because nobody goes to studios anymore. That whole industry collapsed. To go to a big studio, is the luxury of only a few artists. And everyone else works at home because it sounds good and because it's more fun and it's cheaper. And the whole thing is, so those big studios then, now they are busy for the next some years, archiving all of this, and then it will be gone. And it's a world that I miss very much because the studio world in New York was really fantastic. When you had your choice of many studios and many different engineers and many different ways to approach a piece of music, and it was really exciting. And you had a number of producers who go, "We're going to do that at that studio, and then we're going to go there to do that, and there to do that." And you're like, "Wow!" It was really thrilling. It's gone. And I try not to be nostalgic, but I have to admit, just a little nostalgic about that because it involved a lot of people and it involved a lot of energy, really interesting energy and motion. You would go here, there, you'd be pulling, you'd be like doing roadie stuff, which I really love, and it would be very physical as opposed to sit in a place that's much more mental place to do music, and you can do it all more easily in one place and in one box. So the hundreds of boxes got reduced to very few.
I mean, one of the big changes in the way that the people sort of listen now is the use of algorithms and the idea that streaming services will sort of choose your music for you. And of course, you can still go in there and use it like a big library and know exactly what you're looking for. But there's also more of a sense that they will learn about you and then they will suggest what you should listen to. And that obviously involves collecting, information on you. And I wondered, as somebody who's, your music, some of your albums explore these themes of information collection and privacy and things like that. I mean, how do you feel about that? It could be something on Amazon. It could be a Netflix going, "Oh, we think you'll like this." I mean, is that something that you're, optimistic, skeptical, ambivalent about that?
Well, you're all music explorers, so you know that one of the biggest pleasures of music is finding new things and finding new ways, your own ways to find new things, whether it's a live music or whether it's somebody tells you got to check this out or something obscure. This is the pleasure of the hunt. Who wants to be told this is the thing? Not me. I mean, in a certain extent, yes, so that I can then drill down and feel that I'm doing it myself. But if I am having some, okay, so let's take that example of Amazon. You've just gotten the book, and bing, John, you loved that book. You're going to love this book. And I just like the feeling of that book that I just bought? That was a gift. That wasn't for me. Don't think you know me because of what I just bought. I might have had my other reasons. You don't know what my reasons are. So be an explorer, be pushing to find, interesting things. That's the fun of it. We all know that. That's what you do. I know, I read your biographies. I know what you're doing, roughly. And I know roughly what I'm doing. And part of that is the pleasure of making your own connections between things and going, wow, that thing sounds like that over there, and I was just in Morocco and heard that, and then somebody else told me check out this, but that's the world that we live in. So some of these information systems can be good, but to depend on them is it's just one way to get information. Don't give up your own methods that you've devised to find out what's interesting and beautiful in the world. That's what makes you an explorer.
And which sort of artists at the moment do you feel are, not just doing, good songs, but you feel are doing something that feels new to you? That genuinely sort of excites and feels fresh.
Well, new to me is, I don't know if I have a big continuum of new and old. The thing that affected me the most this week was some fado shows that I went to in Lisbon at the beginning of the week, and they were just amazing, partially because in these places, I'm sure you've been to fado places, and it's kind of great how you're in a big dark place and somebody starts singing and there's no light on that person and there's no mic on that person. It's just somebody starts singing and you don't even know where they are. And it was so thrilling because it got rid of all of the spotlight, the stage, the ring, listen to this. It was just somebody began and it was just like, it was breathtaking because of all the things that weren't there, but mostly because of the things that were there, which is, singing that is something that feels like so necessary, I guess.
And do you find, you mentioned nostalgia earlier and how you didn't like to be too nostalgic, and I've noticed that there are certain kinds of artists who seem to, they don't have the nostalgia gene in the same way that someone like David Byrne just generally seems to be like, no, I'm excited about this thing that's just happening now. And then you've got other people, like Keith Richards or whatever, who essentially just lives 40 years ago, like in his head. Do you find that something, and it's something I think about myself, that nostalgia is something that one, as you grow older, that you almost have to sort of fight against, that it has such a strong gravitational pull, or does it just not have that pull on you, and that you are still sort of excited by the new?
Well, I'm both. I don't have a policy, but I mean, one of the movie that I just did called Heart of a Dog is about that, really, about how to move through time and what it feels like to be in this moment that we are in this second, and how and what it is to remember, and what it is to remember so well that you forget it, and what it is to forget. And I think also you can experience something in the present tense that happened a long time ago that is still very intensely present. It doesn't have to be futuristic or new. The tyranny of the new is just like, it's just exhausting for people. I mean, it's just about, TED Talk news sort of thing. We were talking about that earlier today. It was like, always realize that when you're hearing these guys with their thing, and their chinos and they're talking about the future and how it's going to be, it's going to be great because technology is going to solve all our problems. Because we're going to be robots, basically, and I'm like thinking, like, I'm feeling super organic, I'm not feeling too robotic, and what are you talking about, So, and I also notice during the TED Talks that behind the back is a little thing they have for sale, but, it's quite subtle because they're only flashing it once in a while. The thing they have for sale, the new software, the new whatever, it's for sale, the future. So be careful about what they're selling you. It might be just your fear of the future, and it's a very fearful moment for people now. It's a very, very fearful moment, and so technology promises to solve that. I mean, this song that I you mentioned before, Oh Superman was written in the early 80s, and it was a song about the failure of technology to save us. It's a song about a war that is still going on, and even more so, but it's the same war that's been advertised in many different guises since then. And but it's the same one. So every time I sing this song, people are like, "You're so in the moment." So is it like happening now? And they'd forget. It's the same war. It's the same situation. It's the same lure of technology that's going to save you. It's going to save you all. So this was a song about the helicopters that were going to rescue all the hostages in the desert, and they went in and they crashed. And so it was a song about that, among other things. And authority. And, big structures, big social structures.
And amazingly, a number 2 hit in Britain, which is one of
Fluke.
the strangest things that's ever happened in the history of the British charts.
Yeah.
But
I love British radio. really, it's so open, It's just like they're very welcoming to things that are not so in the mainstream. And it was John Peel who really helped me at the beginning. I made this record for $500 for National Endowment for the Arts, and I was selling it mail order from my house. And that means somebody calls me on the phone, says, "Could I have a record?" And I go wrap it up and walk to the post office. So I got a call from John Peel, and he said, I'd like to order some records. I said, "Great." And he said, "I'll need 80,000 by Friday and 80,000 more by Monday." And I said, "Okay." I get right back to you. So, I called Warner Brothers Records and said, "Can you press a bunch of records for me?" And they said, "That's not how we work here. We're not a manufacturing agency. You're going to have to sign an 8-record deal." I was like, and at the time, that seemed like a very bad idea because I'm a snob and I'm from the art world. And then I started thinking, no, actually, it's interesting to have a bunch of things that are cheap enough for people to buy. This is my artwork of the moment, and so I was very proud of it. I got a lot of flack from other artists for doing this. They said, "What a sellout." 6 months later, the language had been tweaked, and it was suddenly called crossing over, and everyone wanted to do it. So it was, the context is shifting below your feet all the time. So it was, yeah.
Well, that's great. I think we've got a little time for questions, if you'd like to just have that, if anybody's got questions. Yeah, Bill?
You mentioned about real estate earlier and how important that is to artists, and it seems to me to be the enemy of creativity, and it's been a real issue in London, and I know it has in New York. And there's a new kind of artist colony has opened up in a little town called Margate, which is about 70 miles away from London. I'm wondering, are there equivalents of that in New York, and in the future, where do you see artists congregating?
I haven't been to Margate. I'm really glad that it's happening. There are a few collectives going on here and there, and it's mostly, not so much in New York, really. Some places in Brooklyn that do that. I think mostly I would tell a young artist or a musician to go to Berlin because it's more that's the best real estate at the moment. But I also think that there are. I don't want to underestimate the online communities because they really are. It's a coherent thing as well, and being able to do that is using the power of what we can do. So also. In terms of boundaries, I want to mention a project that I just did in New York, which I mentioned in context of the guitar piece, but it was a piece called Habeas Corpus, and this was a work that involved a lot of technology and music. It started out as a music work and then became a different one. It was going to be a streaming project with with prisoners in New York. A lot of people in New York forget to mention that the second biggest industry in New York State is after insurance is prisons. We're a prison state, and now the relationship of state to city, of course, the state is minuscule compared to the power of New York City. But anyway, I had wanted to do a piece that I had done in Milan 15 years ago called Dal Vivo, and it was streaming a prisoner from San Vittorio prison onto a three-dimensional cast of his body and putting him in the Prada Foundation for several months. And it was about, telepresence and how to jump borders and what different ways to experience time. And so it was. Now I tried to do this when the Park Avenue Armory, which is a huge building in New York. It was originally an armory for soldiers and military parades and stuff. And so I had proposed doing this with New York prisoners, streaming their images from New York prisons onto these 2 rows of like Hatshepsut statues like this, and they would just be like living statues. We worked on this for several months, and Homeland Security said, "You will never do this project in the United States." There was no upside to that statement. I didn't see a sunny side to that. So my partners began to be Reprieve, a group in London, and they represent people who are on death row in the United States, and also Guantanamo detainees. So I talked to Reprieve, and I'm on the phone to London, and I'm saying, well, it would be like a talking statue, and it would be like a big, 3D film projection, streaming, complicated technological problem, and instead of politely saying, "Thank you so much for your interesting project," she said, "Tell me more." And this was Kat Craig, the lead lawyer at Reprieve. And so we did this project, and she introduced me to my collaborator, who's Mohammed El-Garani, the youngest detainee at Guantanamo. He was imprisoned between the ages of 14 to 21. And he was put in solitary and tortured, and a number of things about his story. He lives in West Africa, so we built a big studio in West Africa. And then we beamed his image transatlantically, which was very hard to do technically, a huge amount of number crunching, live into this place in New York and wrapped his image onto a three-dimensional statue of his body, the size of the Lincoln Memorial. And so he sat there for 3 days live from Africa and spoke to people. Now this is a border, and I'm mentioning this again too because it's a project for me of working in a digital world is about, and working also in a real world where borders are a big deal these days with so many refugees. How do you jump a border? What do you do as an artist to look at those issues? And musician as well. So this became a big music project as well, because so many musicians came to play in this situation. They said, "I just want to come and play here." And so all day, people came to join this huge installation. And I thought from that, I realized from that, never underestimate the audience. These people came to play. They came to look at this thing. Guantanamo for us is our gulag. It's a very shameful thing. We are able to torture these people for so many years because we immediately declared them non-persons. So they didn't have to be relate to the Geneva Convention. We could do what we wanted. And it's a question of language. As you know, a lot of you are journalists, you know that you can shave the language, you can make it sound. It can be anything. You can make this thing turn into that thing. So that's what we did in this situation. And it was, for me as an artist and musician, one of the most intense experiences of my life, because I was able to collaborate with someone in a way that I hadn't been able to, using maximum technology, and to look at these stories. Now, I was not able to say a lot of these stories, really say what happened, because there are many ways that you're not allowed to speak about this. For example, my collaborator was his back was broken, his head was broken, he was cut everywhere. And he didn't want to see doctors because American doctors were at all his torture sessions, as were American psychologists. Now, I could not say that. What I was allowed to say was the behavioral science consultancy team was available at each session. That's the official language. Also, there were a number of many suicides at Guantanamo. You know, we think we live in this information-rich culture. We do not. We live in one that has a certain level of information traveling on the top, and then a lot of information that we just have no idea. Especially, I'm just talking especially about Americans right now. With that issue and with surveillance culture, we know not very much. So watching the language being shaped like that was really interesting for me, and to be able to present this story. He was like everyone but 2% of the people in Guantanamo. He had as much to do with it as you do. In other words, it's all about profiling and getting the prisoners we needed to get from the basically Saudis. So anyway, I'm going to just say one more thing about this because it was a very intense experience for me to present his story versus the official story, and in this context, in an art context. And the thing that I most was struck by was there was a camera. It's about like 5 times the height of this ceiling, and the statue is about the height of this top of this room. So people are looking at this guy in Africa live, and they know that he can see them too because we had a two-way camera. So we have visual contact with this person who's not supposed to be there. And so all of these Americans are going, they're playing music to him because they all brought their instruments and they're playing for him, they're singing, and it's a sort of silent pantomime in a way because we don't have an audio feed. But so many of them are going up, getting his eye contact and just going, I'm sorry. It was like, I thought, this is the most intense moment of my life, to be able to open a channel between parts of the world that have very different pictures of each other, and living in such a fractured world as we do. And as musicians and artists, I think it's not obligatory, but I, as an artist, like to engage in that. Now, I don't think political art is necessarily any better than any other kind of art. That's I should say that because it's like, I can look at a giant blue painting and it can give me more the feeling of freedom than any long tirade about freedom and the importance of, engagement. So that said, I really loved using the maximum power of technology, American technology, to do this, because so much of the technology is used I was an artist in residence at NASA, and so, which was an extremely weird gig, I have to say, and noticed that much of that technology, of course, is used for war and surveillance, and not for art. So I feel a kind of obligation almost as an artist to just pull some of that away and use it for another, sneaky project to, I use a lot of drones as well. I shot a lot of my movie with drones, and I just love using, flipping stuff around and kind of going, well, what else could we do with this thing? This one is broken. How can you use it in a different way? So anyway, I didn't mean to answer your question with such a long thing. and I know I probably spoke too long about that issue, but and because music for me is joy, but it's also about trying to find truth in the world.
Do we have another question?
I promise I won't go off like that.
Well, following up from what you said, and in general, do you think right now, with all the censorship that is going on online and offline, and it's something that concerns us more the days gone, do you think that music has been kind of stripped of these messages that used to be channeling before? And I think, I've seen a documentary about Nina Simone lately, very good one, which actually you reviewed, that you understand how certain stars were trying to make sense and convey a message. And I personally think that because of the censorship of the, multinational labels or anything, right now, music, especially music that we're talking about, is becoming emptier of that kind of messages, or is self-censored in lots of ways. Do you perceive that?
I do perceive self-censorship, and what you're supposed to be talking about, what you're supposed to be writing about, what you're supposed to be singing about, becomes very codified in each thing. So when you see somebody break, when you see like a rapper break the rules, I'm just cheering over on the side of people who talk about things you're not supposed to really be talking about. I love that. I love it, and because it makes you see where the rules are, And again, like with the blue painting, I don't think it's our obligation to make the world a better place. Believe me, I'm not like a missionary. I just, besides, it's such a hard question. When you say better place, better for who? Better for you and your friends? Better for who? The world? What are you talking about? So I think, as an artist, I just try to make the best thing I can myself. And whether that's political or not, I don't think it's like more or less something. But I do see definitely people censoring themselves, because there's a lot of things to write about, and a lot of things to talk about, and there are we live in a much more conservative culture than we did 25 years ago. It's really clamped down on people, what you're supposed to be doing and what you can say. One of the most heartbreaking projects about this project that I did, which was called habeas corpus, which is of course the Latin word for the court tells the jail, you must give us this body, and it's obviously the rule that protects everyone in the Western world in particular, so that the king can't throw you in prison for no reason forever. So that's what gives you the right to, say that you can have a chance to tell your story. Anyway, I was talking to some kids about this project, and the idea was to have kids, American kids, interview Mohammed, and the kids who were the age when he was captured, 14 to 21, and they would ask him questions by Skype, and they would just say, what was it like? What is it like to have somebody else tell your story? And it's like, how did you feel? All of that stuff. And then I was talking to the artist Laura Poitras, who is very engaged in political things, and she said, I think what you should do next is have those kids do a press conference and tell the press what they found. And I thought, that is a great idea. That's a great idea. However, so I mentioned that to the promoters of this, and they said, absolutely not, because these ideas of like who is dangerous and who is not are people forget to question them. So anyway, that didn't happen. But a lot of kids came up and said to me, do you think I could get on some kind of list talking to you like this? These are like 15-year-old kids. I said, oh my God. You think you're going to get on a list for talking to me about this? On a list? And it broke my heart. I thought, who are these people? They were born around 9/11. They were born in a time of fear. And they are afraid. They are afraid. And the worst part is, they could get on a list. you know, all they have to do is go one more step and, you know, book a ticket to somewhere, and they'll be on some lists. Make no mistake, we're living in a very, very different time. And as musicians and artists, how do we respond to that? You know, it's something that is a big question for me. Not that I have any kind of answer. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come today, is see what you thought, you know, about this. And does it change music? Does it change what we do as artists? Does it change our responsibility to our own cultures? And you know, or do we have any responsibilities? I don't know. So anyway.
Well, when we're doing an interview in front of an audience, the dream is basically that somebody answers questions that you haven't got around to asking yet, which you did.
Okay.
So it made it a great pleasure. And thank you, Laurie Anderson.